So with no further ado, Bitcoin, once again, you have a big origin line right here. Massive, massive line. Rejection, rejection, failure pattern, potential higher low. You're looking at this in the larger sense. And the big question is it going to make a higher low here or not? Or is it coming down over here? And if it does come down, the chances of it breaking out of this formation is pretty low. And if you look at things on a more micro chart, within that same context, let me go to the 1 hour chart. The area where it has a chance to put in a higher low is the middle of this ascending range. It is in the point of control. So there is a chance here. And one thing I need to note that is I did let folks know on YouTube and Discord and all that about 3 to 4 days ago. I think the next few days until August 8th is going to be a horrible, choppy time the price is going to be too choppy. It's going to be a bad time to be trading. And we've had essentially choppy price action, fairly directionless, just up, down, up and down, up and down, where you would only be able to trade extremely small time frames like 3 to 15-minute charts. So, and I think that this green line here being roughly Tuesday of next week, you might have more of the same until then. So this higher low might be looking like it's forming a higher low just because it's just naturally choppy and it breaks down next week. I don't see resolution of this idea that I started off with, higher low or not higher low. It almost seems like that's not going to be known until next week, and we're going to get more boring, choppy stuff. But we do have very specific lines where we can be alert and realize that the odds are changing, where, okay, it looks like it's coming straight down to the 20K range, or, hey, it looks like it's going straight up to the 25K range, which are really the two options, and those are the next stop zones, whether it's first moving down or moving up. So let's go get some Bitcoin. All right, is this going to make a higher low or not? In the difficulties of figuring out what's going to happen next, you always have potential fake outs around key / important lines. And you have an extremely important EMA creeping around price right now, which is the weekly 10 EMA, which I'll throw on. So if there's going to be a trick play that's going to make it look like Bitcoin will bounce from here, it's possible that you do get a totally tradable bounce. But on that bounce, it doesn't ever truly make its, actually not truly, but it just doesn't make its way up here to the next pit stop. Rather, the bounce could simply be indicative of, in hindsight, once it fully plays out, is it bounces here just to be able to do a rejection, then a failure pattern. So rejection means it comes perfectly up to it, and failure means that then it goes above it and then fails below. It's a very, very common pattern that happens both on straight lines or EMAs like this here. Rejection, rejection, failure. Or in this case, rejection, rejection, come up shy, then failure, and then rejection, and then failure. So you had a rejection pattern, failure pattern on a small time scale, and on your more larger time frames, you had a perfect rejection and then a failure pattern later. So it's very common in that same. So that happened on the straight line. The same thing could be what this next bounce is. It forms a low or high, and it simply plays out a very, very common pattern: rejection then failure, or failure then rejection. That might be what happens. Personally, I'm not going to try to trade up to catch that move up. I would be personally more interested in seeing how price. How it starts behaving if that were to happen around the weekly 10, because if it gets above it of the weekly, so you can really zoom in there, right? So let's say once price bounces here, let's say it bounces and it comes up to the weekly 10, something like the weekly 10 does this, right? It's right over here. If you zoom in, what I would be looking for is a good area to go short, essentially, because let's see here. Where does price really play like this? So even if price gets above it, let's go down to 15-minute candle. Now I'm going to have to go backwards again, sorry. Let's go back. little bit more chaos on this line so you can see what I'd be looking for. But once it gets, come on. Yeah, so here you go. Here's a rejection failure pattern. This is perfect. Rejection, then failure pattern. It happened more immediately, but that's and the weekly 10 was straight. Here it's falling, but the same thing could happen with the falling red line, rejection, then failure. But see, that's what just happened. But if it does get fully above, what I would be looking for is something like this. So this was a failure pattern, but it formed it stuck its higher low, then got above, used it as support. I think that in this next move up on the higher low, Bitcoin could do something to this effect where you have the same thing happen, but right here, instead of going up to make new local highs, I think after it gets above and uses that support, I think you're going to see it start going below it and using it as resistance, and that is what I would be looking for. I would be a little bit too hesitant to want to short Bitcoin aggressively around there because there is a high chance that it goes, that it gets continuation all the way up to 25K. So I don't want to aggressively just short into this necessarily, even though it would have worked here. That was the trade. It would have been 100% perfect. It's a failure pattern above the. I might have had a trade set up for that. I don't remember. Shame on me if I didn't, because this was a perfect one. It's a failure pattern on the trading channel, and it's a rejection of the weekly 10. Like, what more obvious setup could you have? So it is possible, but because of this potential higher low, and it's the fifth time this line would be tested, I just think continuation is too possible. So instead, I would be looking for price to get above the weekly 10, use it as support, and then break down from it. And it wouldn't just necessarily tank. You would see the small candles interacting with this bearishly before it broke down. And I think that would give you the best edge for a downside move, as opposed to just blindly guessing right when it gets to that red line. So imagine the red line's like this. Right when it gets to the red line, going short. I don't think I'm going to try doing that. So I want to be really specific with what I'm saying. But that's personally what I'm looking out for. I'm not excited about being long. In my video was it my last live video? Yeah, where it says incoming dump, that thumbnail. If you haven't seen that, and again, if you're watching the recording, it might pop up here if you want to watch that. But and I'll link you to it at the end for anybody watching the recording of this. But there is a big sign in the stock market saying that crypto is going to be brought down very heavily alongside the traditional market pretty soon. The initiation of that could happen as early as tomorrow. And I say initiation of it. I'm not saying the big move, 10% down days. No, I'm not saying that. But that's where support starts failing and over next week, and maybe some move down begins, and then the next week get the retest of it, and then the week after, then everybody gives up being bullish and it just tanks. So things getting potentially really bearish by the middle or end of August, if not a little sooner. So you might want to watch that video. But so with that in mind, that's why I don't want to trade up here. I'm more interested in trading down. And it's a bear market. Even though we're an ascending channel, but I don't know. I just think it's going to be a lot safer. That's what's going through my mind. You don't have to hold the same opinions. If you're having a great, honestly, just look at this. Had I followed channel rules and just taken profits within 1.5 to 2% of raw price, simply longing my line once, twice, 3 times, I could have taken profit within 1.5 to 2% range. Long here, take profit at 2%. Bam, would have taken profits here. Nice trade. And I would have done it again. And I would have been able to do it thrice and then get stopped out on the third one. But that's great. If you're 3 for 4 on the same trade and you get stopped out on the fourth, that's totally worth it. Right? So I'm not trying to say it's not worth it, but for me, I don't want to trade this choppy mess. But it is doable. And unfortunately, you'd have to probably use more leverage than what I, as a content creator, ever even talk about to trade smaller moves. So as a content creator, even on Discord, I'm not suggesting that stuff. I'm more suggesting folks to take it easy and go outside and do something else. But what am I looking out for right now? is the bottom of this point of control. Because if it breaks, it's going to come back up and test it, and likely then come straight down to 21,600. So it won't. I don't expect it necessarily to come all the way down immediately. I think it'll lose this as support. So this line right here, I think this line could be lost as support if it's broken, right? If it's broken, it lost as support, but then it'll come up, use it as resistance, and then come straight down to 21,600. But I don't know if that's going to happen. And so immediately, this support line, if you want to know horizontally where is that, it's roughly at 222.80. So around, yeah, just say 22,250. Let's call it 22,250. If that breaks, then yeah, you're probably gonna have some retest of it, and then it's gonna break down straight to 21,600. For it'll be less than $1,000 move, but that it would initiate it pretty quickly. And what I'm looking for on the way back up so this is very short-term time frame stuff, right? It's the daily 10. Just look at this. The daily 10 is getting ready to cross what? The top of the point of control. So you have resistance and structural resistance. A very strong EMA resistance because the daily 10 is heavily traded. Heavily traded. People will become sellers at that. Or shorters, or whatever you want to call them. They'll become bearish. And it's a structural area of resistance that was support. A lot of support on the small time frames. So I'm going to be interested to see, even before the weekly 10 comes into play, which might not happen, but it easily could at this point. But very, very short-term time frame. It's all about this level here, the bottom and the top of the point of control. And those are the ramifications. If Bitcoin can get above the daily 10 and above this, then you're going to go test the weekly 10. It's an if-then statement. If you break below 22,250, you're going to use it as resistance, and then you're going to break down to 21,600. So in the very meantime, if you think about it as three zones here, that's just really the easiest way to look at it here. Let's go ahead and do something like this. So one zone here, nothing's changed. Your next zone here, and bam. 3 zones. And this zone, it could go either way. Once you break into the lower zone, you're going to come test the second zone and then go back down to the bottom of this zone. Even if you touch this zone a little bit, it's like lava, or maybe not lava, like quicksand. You touch it and you try to get out. Well, before you do it, you got to touch bottom before you can try to bounce out of it. Something to that effect. Quicksand. Right? But conversely, if it can get back into the top zone, then I think it's going to have a natural affinity. Price simply wants to touch the daily 10. So if you start getting back into the top zone and use this as support, then it's very, very, very likely going to go hit the weekly 10. And so it's just a 1, 2, 3 zone mentality. And if you play basketball or football or whatever, it's just, think of it as zones. And again, what I'm saying right now is very short-term time frame stuff. But that's probably all that's going to happen for the next 4 days is what you're seeing right here. I find it a little unlikely that anything outside of these zones is going to happen until Tuesday of next week. I don't see resolution. So if you're not a very small time frame mentality person, which it's fine if you're not, maybe like the 1 hour, 4 hour and daily charts or the weekly chart or something, and you swing trade or whatever your case is. But this is probably the most valuable time frames and the valuable things to be just in general to know and to look out for until we get resolution. Hopefully next week. We have Friday. So let's change topics here. Friday could be a little tricky. I posted on Twitter my calendar for Discord, and on those I include the high impact economic data. There are 3 different high impact things coming out tomorrow. It's not nearly as integral as Jerome Powell, Fed chair of the U.S. Speaking. It's nothing to that effect, but some weird trickery could happen where price tomorrow, especially in the morning, breaks into the top zone, goes to the bottom zone, and lands in the middle zone. And honestly, that might be exactly what happens. I'm not joking. Like, it's actually a really good guess. Or overnight, you break down, and then you scream up, and then you go back to the middle zone. Like, it is possible. So what I said at the beginning, if you break below this, you'll likely hit your head as resistance. There is an exception. If it's below here and starts rising around 8:30 a.m., so this is New York time, between 8:30 and 9:30, I wouldn't expect this to be used as resistance. I would expect it to go up a lot and do something tricky. So outside of that window of an hour and a half tomorrow morning, so that would be 11 p.m. at night on Friday or no. That would be 11 p.m. at night for Australians. So it'd be a nighttime for Australia, early morning for America, and then mid-afternoon, early afternoon for Europeans. But right around 8:30 a.m. New York, I do have an exception to what I said. If it's already broken below here, you can't see. If things float down at nighttime, all right. So let's say things float down at night, and then 8:30 comes, then you see it racing up. I would not expect a rejection. I would expect it to come at least to the top or higher, okay, within that 1.5 hour time frame. And if it happens to be here, okay, during tomorrow's or in the pre-market open around 8:30 a.m., so the market's open, traditional TradFi opens around 9:30. If it's in the middle and it breaks below, I would also kind of have the hunch that it'll immediately zip back up and then land in the middle. So if it does happen to be here tomorrow, whichever way it goes first, I would expect it to then go the opposite way and then land in the middle. I would have a high likelihood of it landing back in the middle if you get volatility around that time, right? But, so that's if it starts there in the middle at that time. If things flow down at night, and then it starts here around that time, I think it could actually, I think that would actually give it a decent potential to get more continuation to the upside. But I would also be aware of the idea that it could start here, race up at market open, and then also come back to the middle, right? But if it does flow down here at night and races up in the morning and breaks through here, I think this situation has a greater chance of getting continuation up to the weekly 10 up here at around 24,000 than if tomorrow morning price is still in the middle zone. If it's in the middle zone, I think it's going to have a greater chance of, no matter what happens, it's going to break back to the middle and just do this the whole weekend. And if it floats up overnight, I don't know what I would think about that. I wouldn't trust it, but I think it could come straight back down at market open and then actually continue up. But I would expect a trick play no matter what. Whether it's in zone 1, 2, or 3 tomorrow in the morning pre-market hours, I would expect some trick play. But I would honestly be a little bit more bullish if it started the day off down here, because I would expect that to be your mini bear trap. As weird as that is, that's how that market works, and it's going to drag Bitcoin down if that happens. So I don't say that kind of thing a lot. Lower price, I'd be more bullish, but it's just so many times that it's perfect timing. It floats, and then the news or 9:30 happens, and it goes boom, straight up. All right, and if it floats up at night, I would actually be hesitant. I would actually think it's going to come straight down and then maybe come back to the middle. So a bunch of choppy stuff. It's going to be hard to play. It's going to be really hard to play, and doing nothing could be the most valuable thing to do, unless, of course, you're trading on 1 minute to 5 minute time frames, and you're a small time frame trader. It doesn't matter what price is doing, as long as you have 2% to work with, which even here you still do. This is like 2.5% moves. Good to go. So what I'm saying doesn't apply to 100% of everybody. I don't want to, but for the majority of people, this is a great time not to be trading. And that's Bitcoin.